भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। ओम पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम्। यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्रसुतमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः। ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनः यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः। देवाय तस्मै नमः। देवाय तस्मै नमः। So let us chant. Let us chant verses 24th to 27th of the 6th chapter. Number 24, first. Sankalpa Prabhavan Kaman. Sankalpa Prabhavan Kaman. Sankalpa Prabhavan Kaman. Tyaktva sarvana sheshataha. Sarvana sheshataha. Manasairvendriya gramam. Manasairvendriya gramam. Viniyamya samantataha. Viniyamya samantataha. Shanai shanai uparamed. Shanai shanai uparamed. Buddhya dhriti grihitaya. Atma samstham manaf kritva. Amta samstham manaf kritva. न किंचिदपि चिंतयेत् न किंचिदपि चिंतयेत् यतो यतो निश्चरति यतो यतो निश्चरति मनश्चंचलमस्थिरम् मनश्चंचलमस्थिरम् ततस्ततो ततस्ततो नियम्यैतत् ततस्ततो नियम्यैतत् आत्मन्येव वशं नयेत् आत्मन्यं प्रशान्तमनसं ह्येनं प्रशान्तमनसं ह्येनं योगिनं सुखमुत्तमम् योगिनं सुखमुत्तमम् उपैति शान्तरजसम् उपैति शान्तरजसम् ब्रह्मभूतम् अकल्मषम् ब्रह्मभूतम् अकल्मषम्। Before we begin, I just wanted to mention that in my trip recently, we went to a wedding in Punjab from Delhi. So there was a whole bunch of us that all traveled together in a bus, 32 people. And while we were traveling on the bus, my son, who was looking at the route and so on and so forth, said, "Dad, we are in Kurukshetra." And so sure enough, we were passing right through Kurukshetra. And what a, I wish I could stop there and do some pilgrimage, but the whole family was going, so we had to go. But apparently there are plans to make that into a pilgrimage, which has not been done so far. So it was very nice. So all I could do was to just do namaste at that point. Very beautiful. So the chapter 6, as you know, is devoted to Nididhyasanam, which should be translated as Vedantic meditation. And at the point of repeating to make sure that we are clear about it, the Vedantic meditation is a very specific meditation. Not specific in the sense that it's only limited to it. It's not that, but it should be understood to be what it is. And that is different from the normal understanding of meditation. Because, meditation has now become a very fashionable thing. Mindfulness and meditation. This is an interesting country, honestly. I tell you, I really admire the Americans. And how, and now I'm also an American because I've been living here for 55 years. But how quickly they adopt new ideas and make a big deal out of it is just amazing. No one does it as well as we do. And meditation is one of them. Yoga was, of course, there, but now it has become everybody's meditating, which is good. So we have to understand what is meditation. Because of people, I also, if I tell them, sometimes I tell people I'm teaching Vedanta, and they don't understand what it is. But they'll say, is meditation also there? So then I say, yes, this is, now we understand that you must be feeling very calm. So this we have to understand, what is Nididhyasanam? And as you know what Nididhyasanam is, that it is not generating new knowledge, number one. It is based on previously generated knowledge through classroom study. Number one. Number two, it is not culminating necessarily into thoughtlessness, which is the understanding of the normal meditation, is that you just, you become nirvikalpa. So the nirvikalpa means there is no thoughts whatsoever. So that is not true for Vedantic meditation. So Vedantic meditation means that there is a certain view of who I am, which has to be understood by learning and appreciated in a Vedantic setting, in a meditative setting, not Vedantic setting, in a meditative setting. And what that means is that the previous knowledge must be understood to a point. An example I can give is that of classical music. Classical music means, as opposed to normal film music, some rock music, it has certain, especially the Indian classical music, where ragas have to be appreciated. And the people who understand ragas appreciate music more than people who do not understand ragas. They both may be very pleasant, but if you can identify how this raga is, then your enjoyment is that much deeper. Okay, so this is one thing. Now, suppose There is a classical, and this happens many times in the film music in India, they are based out of classical music. So if you're listening to a song, and then it is you identify it with as a classical music, you'll say, this is that kind of a raga. Now, supposing there is a lot of noise and a lot of other activities going on when you're listening to it, you don't enjoy it as much. But supposing you have your headphones on, which I did, I was just talking about that because I took my headphones and on this long journey to India, I was listening to some classical music. It was so beautiful. Why? Because there was no other thing that was distracting me. I had my eyes closed and I could really enjoy the classical songs. So the Vedantic meditation is something like that. In what way? You must be aware of the form of the ragas, number one, which is education through vidya. Number two, you alone are with that knowledge in meditation. And you invoke it and you enjoy it, just like I did in the headphones. So what that means is that the ragas must be previously known. Number two, you are not distracted by other things. You are just focusing on that. That sense of enjoyment and understanding is the essence of what is called Vedantic meditation or Nididhyasana. So if you recall, I'm just going to draw your attention to this very good example that Swami Paramarthananda gave. I think out of all the examples that I've seen, that one is most gripping to me. And if you recall, it is so important that I don't mind repeating it so that you are clear about it. If you recall, what he said was, like watching a movie. I think that was a great example. So when you're watching a movie, supposing you go to a movie house, now you are focused on getting there and enjoying the movie. But the very process of getting to the movie house means that you have to do a lot of other things. You have to rearrange your schedule, you have to do this, that, or the anyway, all of that. Then you sit down and you go through commercials and so on. Now, at that point, you are aware of the fact that you are sitting down. You are aware of the fact that you have a life apart from the movie. Isn't it? You have a life apart from the movie, which means you're sitting down, you may be remembering, oh my gosh, I forgot to do that. Anyway, I'll do that later on. So you have a certain identity outside of the movie. And then the movie is still starting, there's commercials, you're starting to pay attention to it, and then the movie starts. When the movie starts, your identity with the movie plot is not complete yet. Why not? Because you become more comfortable. You're sitting on the chair, who was around me. So you are aware of two things. You are aware of your own identity, and you are beginning to become identified with the characters. You haven't completely identified with the characters. So this would be called Savikalpa Samadhi. Beautiful example. I think Swami Paramarthananda really clarified it very well in this example. So now there is a dual attention. First of all, there was a singular attention to your own identity in life. The movie had not even started yet. Now when the movie has started, you are still aware of the fact that your popcorn is still there. You're still eating popcorn. And you're beginning to pay attention to the movie. There comes a point where your identity as a moviegoer recedes into the background. You're no longer eating popcorn. You're no longer aware of who's sitting next to you. You are now completely absorbed in the plot of the movie. This is what we call nirvikalpa samadhi. Vikalpa nasti means there is no duality in your identity. But it doesn't mean thoughtlessness. This is important to understand. Because now you are one with the plot, whatever the plot is. The plot could be tragic, it could be comedic. But there is a storyline. You cannot just have a blank screen and be absorbed by it. There is a storyline, there is some identification with the plot. Similarly to that is Vedantic meditation. How? At this point in time, our identity is with the things that I see around me. I'm a father, I'm a mother, I'm a neighbor, I'm a son, I'm a daughter, whatever. This is my identity. The movie plot is the education of the Vedanta. But listen, there's something else going on. I don't see it yet, but I am beginning to get acquainted with it. And this is why this is the 6th chapter of the Gita. Chapter 2 to number 5 gives you the plot of the movie. Na jayate mriyate vakyadachit. That the Atma is not born. Na jayate. It is not something that can be burnt or killed. No. Even space cannot be burnt. Let alone the Atma. Atma is even higher than this space. It cannot be burnt. It cannot be killed. It cannot be changed. It cannot be harmed. This is the plot of the movie. But I am not yet identified with the plot. Because my identity as a human being is overwhelming. This is what I can understand, this is what I can identify with, this is what I can relate to. But there's an alternate plot that I am starting to get acquainted with. And there comes a point where the plot becomes understandable. At first it's not even understandable. But there comes a point where it is understandable. But at that point in time, I am starting to sit down and watch the movie. And as I'm sitting down and watching the movie, I'm still very much identified with my other role. There comes a point where the plot becomes, it's just like a storyline in a movie. It is exactly what happens. If you are a producer and a director and a writer, it's a very interesting thing how the movie is presented. Some scene is given to you and you're not sure of exactly how that happens and so on. So just talking of that. So there's this movie called Crazy Rich Asians, and so we go to this restaurant, Chef Chu's, and so their son produced it. And so we had heard about it and so on. And my wife had seen the movie. I had never seen it. It turns out that my 13-year-old granddaughter, you're not going to believe this, she has seen the movie 6 times. She knows all the dialogue. I'll tell you why, because what happened was that when I was going from here to India, I was doing some other stuff, I was reading, so on and so forth. And then towards the end of it, I decided I'm going to watch this movie because I never had seen it. Everybody was talking about it. At that point, I was not aware of the fact that Arya had seen it 6 times. Okay? So I'm watching the movie, and then New Delhi comes. And I'm not even finished with the movie. And by now, I'm now getting interested in the plot. Have you seen it? Has anybody seen it? It is interesting. It is really a good...
I read the book.
Oh, you read the book? Yes.
The whole 527 pages.
No, really?
Yeah, I read the whole book. It's very interesting.
Really interesting. So anyway, what happened was that I think I finished about 5/6 of it. And then it stops because in New Delhi has come. No, I'm really interested to finish it. So I happened to be talking to my granddaughter, who was also with us, and separately from us. And she said, "That is one good movie." So I said, Arya, I need to understand how it ended. Because it got finished in the middle. She says, "I have it on my iPhone. You want to see it?" And while the iPhone was going on, she is reciting the dialogue verbatim. And I just talked to her yesterday. She came back separately. She saw it again the 7th time on her way back. Crazy, absolutely crazy. But anyway, it was interesting that you could relate to the characters to a point where you're not aware of who you are. You are just one with the characters. This is exactly what needs to be done in meditation. This is the value. So now with all this long explanation, he says, look at verse number 25. Just revise number 25. Shanaihi shanaihi uparamet buddhya dhriti grihitaya atmasamstham manaf kritva na kinchit api chintayet. Atmasamstham manaf kritva. It means make your mind absorbed in the Atma Samstham. Be resolved into the Atma. This is an important thing to see. Atma Samstham means what? Atma Samstham doesn't mean that I am the Sakshi, I am the Sakshi, I am the Sakshi. I am the witness, I am the witness. Not just this. This is not a plot. It's not a plot of the movie. It's not just one scene. That doesn't really do anything for you. It is part of the scene. But there is much more than that. What do you mean by more than that? It means bringing out every part of the education that has been gone on before, including the beautiful example of electricity and an appliance. How the electricity infuses itself in the appliance without losing its own identity. This is what would be called Atma Samstham as an example. What it means is not mindlessly just repeating, I am the Sakshi, I am the Sakshi, I am this, but understanding the implication of that. Excuse me. Understanding the implication of that. So, for example, understanding that I am Chaitanya Swarupam, which alone infuses the rest of my mind-body complex, enlivens it without losing its identity. This has to be understood. This has to be examined, understood, fully appreciated. Not just mindlessly saying, I'm Sakshi, but what is the implication of that? So the electricity, for example, has no beginning in that example. Has no beginning. If the appliance fails, then nothing happens to the electricity. So the body-mind complex may disappear, but I am something different from that. This has to be appreciated. It cannot be done without a lot of teaching, a lot of logic, a lot of examples, a lot of examination, mananam. All of that has to be done. If it is done, then you get absorbed in the beauty of that. The plot becomes overwhelming. Because being a Sakshi, one has to understand, when did it start? No, it never started. And if that is the case, then how can is it dependent on other things? Because right now, I have the faulty view that I am depending on my body-mind. This is not true. I have to see that the body-mind is dependent on me. I am independent of it. If it's not clear, then I have to study it some more. I have to examine it. But the fact of the matter is just like saying that the appliance, that the electricity is dependent on the appliance. It is not. Even though they are mixed up together at a point and then the whole thing starts with a fan and so on, but the independence of the electricity cannot be questioned. So similarly, when you say Atma Samstham means that my mind is now capable of being absorbed in understanding the enormity of what that is. That I am self-existing. Self-existing? Really? What do you mean by self-existing? It means independent. It means I don't need food? Yes, that's right. It's self-existing. And ajaha, na jayate, it is never born. I'm just giving you some tidbits here and there. This is not a complete plot. But this is what I have to do. If I do this, and I become skilled in doing it, then I just stay absorbed in it. Na kinchidapi chintayet. There is no reason to go away from that. So the rishis and munis and all these very skilled people, which I am trying to become, are such that their thoughts are fully appreciative of the beauty of the Atma, with all of its enormous implication. And nothing else bothers them. If there's a sound, doesn't matter. If there's noise, doesn't matter. If there's hunger, doesn't matter. They are so absorbed in this, I would just say, enormity of this understanding. And this has to be done slowly. It cannot be just a flash of the thing and then, because why? Because really all thoughts and all disturbances, all conclusions have to be explained slowly to myself. Shanai shanai hi uparamet. Shanai shanai hi uparamet. Buddhya dhriti grihitaya. By perseverance, with an intellect, as it says, endowed with perseverance, may we slowly resolve the mind. And this is on these translations. Sometimes when you first read it, which all of us are, including me, making the mind abide in the self. So when you say abide in the self, it can mean thoughtlessness, isn't it? It just means abide in the self. Just like, for example, in the deep sleep state, everything resolves in the self. So it looks like the samadhi is also like that. And eventually it will be. But first, the important thing is to abide in the plot of the self, the beauty of the self, the enormity of the self, the fact that it always is independent of all those kinds of things. So that's the resolution that defines nididhyasana. So these things have to be stated, commented on, explained, and grasped. This is why this is an important chapter, number 6, which is the very definition of nididhyasana. So that's what it is. Here, elsewhere, I'll just mention one other thing. Elsewhere, this is described, not here, that the process of being absorbed in the self has 3 portions to it. Okay? So one is called vairagya. Second one is jnanam. And the third one is uparama. These are the 3 words that are used. But not important what the words are, but what are the concepts. So this is explained in great detail in some other texts, which we will hopefully study sometime. But let me give you a gist of that. So 3 things. One is called vairagya. One is called jnanam. Or you can even say viveka. Vairagya, viveka, and uparama. And so, these 3 things, 3 concepts. So let's understand what vairagya is. Vairagya means not being caught up with a desire for something very acutely, just being able to walk away from it without being caught up in it. And the normal thinking, for example, is that if you were playing with marbles when you were young, or with balloons, then you're fascinated by it. You are still a child fascinated by the balloons or marbles or dolls or something. But as you grow up, you become vairagya. You're no longer, it doesn't grip you as much, because it's not as though you dislike it. It's just that it doesn't matter anymore. This is called vairagya. Then the second one is jnanam or viveka. So in the example of the marbles and dolls and so on, it means it really doesn't need, I don't need it. I don't need it. It's not that important for me. As it is for a child. You know, supposing you give a child, just test it sometime. Supposing you have a 2-year-old and you give him a balloon. And you prick the balloon. And you just watch the reaction for the 2-year-old. He'll just burst out crying. Because to him this balloon is very important. But if you are 20 years old and your balloon bursts, you don't cry. Why? Because jnanam means, so what? It doesn't make any difference to me. There are more important things to do in life. So, vairagyam and jnanam are the first two aspects of this. The third aspect is called uparama. Uparama means not be actively pursuing the involvement with something, not being active. Not being active. Being active means that you are involved with life to such an extent, you have no time to just reflect quietly on your own. So supposing in this the example of the balloons and so on is not that important, but you can still contrive an example. The example would be, yes, you understand that this is just a balloon, vairagya. You understand that it's not very important, jnanam, but you still play with it. This is like, having a 17-year-old boy who still wants balloons for his birthday because it looks nice. And this happens. You find that if there's in your birthday, there's no celebration, no banners, no balloons, no nothing. You feel no one likes me. They're just ignoring me. So uparama means that yes, you have vairagyam, you have jnanam, but you're not following through with it by unnecessarily being occupied in doing things. So word uparama means just not be involved in something. Now, not being involved doesn't mean that you understand why you are not being involved. If that understanding is preceded by vairagya and jnanam, then your uparama is natural. And so this topic comes up where when people become jnanis, they are very munis and rishis who become really good at understanding the self. What happens is that your activity on the other things of life drop off because you don't think they are really important for your happiness. You've already discovered an alternate source of happiness and you're no longer involved with doing things that were important to you. It's like you're no longer playing with balloons of life. And you understand that there is in fact an alternate source of joy. If you don't understand it, then you should not leave things. But if you do understand it, then you should uparamit. Means you should not be involved necessarily in things. An example would be that suppose you understand the implication of the Atma and all of that, and you are now vairagya towards just doing things. Like, for example, supposing you are very fond of going to movies. Let's take that example. Okay, you are very fond of going to movies. Like this happened to me when I was growing up. I was both a cricket player as well as I was very fond of watching cricket. And I knew a lot about the players and their propensities and who is good, who is not, so on and so forth. And even when I came to this country and I was no longer associated, I used to follow cricket. Then I started to study Vedanta, and the interest in cricket fell off. And some of my friends and other people just say, "Hey, did you watch that match with Australia the other day?" Tennis is the same thing. It no longer interests me. I've gone beyond it. But suppose, even though I don't understand the importance of it, I still watch sports, waste my time doing that, then I am not doing uparama. So uparama means that you have to be disinterested based on real knowledge, because I have discovered something better than just watching sports, just to study and just to appreciate the self. This is more important to me. And I don't waste my time just because of previous habits. So it is said that all three things have to be cultivated. Namely, vairagya, jnanam, and uparama. But then you become atmasamstham manavkritva na kinchidapi chintayet. How? Shanai shanaihi uparamet. That slowly disengage yourself. It is just like, you're sitting in a movie theater and you are starting to enjoy the movie, but then you start to notice other people. No, don't do that. Just enjoy the movie. Just completely disengage yourself. And so then we go on to the next verse where Arjuna had actually posed this question. Yes, Krishna, but my mind is going all over the place. How do I control my mind? So he says in number 26, Yata yataha nischarati manaha chanchalam asthiram tatastato niyamya etat atmani eva vasham nayet. So Krishna says that yes, I understand it. You are very right. The way the mind works, it wants new things. This is why we go to new places. You go to a new place, you become enamored with thinking about it, and your mind is going all over the place. He says, yes, I know that happens. But do not worry. Just go back to what you were doing before. Because the old habits die hard, but they will die. They will be taken care of. So that's the next verse itself. Yato nischarati manas chanchalam asthiram tatas tatah niyamya etat atmani eva vasham nayet. So he says, for whatever reason, the unsteady mind, always in a state of flux, goes away. Bringing it back from that with reference to the self alone, may one bring the mind into one's own hand. So that's the same advice given for the nirvikalpa samadhi. Let us see if I'm missing some important things. Hold on just a second. I think that I'm pretty much done with that. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Let's go to verse number 27. Prashantam manasam hi enam yoginam sukhamuttamam upaiti shanta rajasam brahmabhuta akalmasham. So he continues on because he's describing the results of the meditation. This whole section is talking about what you gain by doing meditation, Vedantic meditation. So he says that prashantam manasam hi enam yoginam sukhamuttamam. So sukhamuttamam and prashantam are two words to describe pretty much the same thing. So prashantam means, shantam means peace. Prashantam means something more than just peace. And we will look into that in a minute. So prashantam means prakarshena shantam, means something extra. And the same thing is given in sukham uttamam. Sukham also means happiness. Uttamam means something extra, something beautiful, something extraordinary. So what is that? Let us look into that at this point. So here's the situation. At the moment, we are also capable of happiness and peace. There's no question about that. We all have the experience. Some may have a little bit more than others, but we all do. And also, we are capable of learning from our lives, and how we can rearrange things to maximize our happiness is known to us. But the issue is that my understanding of my experiencing of the sukham is very fleeting. And it is controllable. All of a sudden, in the middle of the day, you develop some pain. Your sukham is gone. All of a sudden, in the middle of the day, there is some emotional problems that occur. Somebody says something to you, which you think is wrong, but you have a conflict with that person. That person thinks this is right, you think it is wrong. Anyway, some emotional instability. Your sukham is gone. All of a sudden you discover that you get a letter saying you have not paid your bills and you forgot. That happened to me a few times. I thought I had paid the bills and I forgot about it. And then now the anxiety is that how much is the late fee and this, that, and the anyway, variety of different things. So this is what is called shantam, all right, but dependent shantam. Without the knowledge of the Vedanta, all sukham is not uttamam. Why? What is the reason for that? Because it is dependent on a variety of different things. You cannot control your life to such a degree that you don't care about anything else. That's not possible. Something or the other always disturbs and so on. But through Vedantic meditation, to Nudidhyasanam, which now is defined as something which is well thought through, well understood, well absorbed, that is the result of this. the Shantam becomes Prashantam. And Sukham becomes Sukha Uttamam. How? Because the Shanti and Sukham really are the two, the same thing pretty much, is not dependent on anything else. This is your own. And by this time, when the mind proposes something, let's do this, that has already been resolved. Right now, if you do not study and you do not understand the implication of the self, you go along with the mind proposes. Mind proposes, let's do this. I need to have Mexican food today. And I know Swami Chinmayananda used to say that. Swami Chinmayananda used to say that. All of a sudden, if you're a coffee drinker and you pass by Starbucks or Pete's Coffee, he wasn't there at that time when he talked about it, you feel like I must have coffee. And if you don't have coffee, then by that time your mind says, coffee, coffee, coffee. Come on, let's do it. And inevitably you stop the car and you go in there and you have coffee. And so you just follow the mind. Here also, when Vedantic meditation, your mind says, there's a very good program going on TV. I think Oscars are coming, Then let us watch the Oscar. No, I want to do meditation. But your mind says, meditation you could do any time. What's the big problem? Oscars only come once a year. And you say, that's a good point. Let's just do Oscar. This is what happens. We just follow our, and so on and so forth. But here, you mean that if a person understands, really, I tell you, the key thing is, this I think is absolutely the main point in the study of this whole thing. I tell you, you don't know that an appreciation of the self is an independent source of joy. If you come to that point, then the whole thing changes. The whole thing changes. Because you see, the thing is, we are rational people. We go with where the sources of joy is. Whatever this is, supposing ice cream gives you, everything else fails, you can have Haagen-Dazs. Because you know that from my experience, eating ice cream or rasgulla or some gulab jamun or something is a source of joy. And to a non-student of Vedanta, the self is not a source of joy. There is no such thing. What do you mean by the self? What do you mean by the Atma? What are you talking about? I understand ice cream. The real progress comes in if by inquiry, by persistence, by devotion, through whatever means, those are separate things, you discover that there is an independent source of joy, which is me alone. Then the whole trajectory changes. And then slowly you discover that this source of joy is independent. is a big thing. This is easy to talk about, but just imagine the enormity of this implication. Really? Independent source of joy? Not dependent on anything? Right, exactly. If you do that, then all the doubts that come in your mind can be tackled. But if this is not known, then you go astray. Then you go to Oscars, this, that, or the other. What's next? Okay, Oscar is finished. What's coming up next? Now let's do this, let's do that. But if you discover this to be an independent source of joy, and it doesn't mean that you do not enjoy ice cream, doesn't mean that a jnani doesn't enjoy ice cream and dosas and this, that, or the other. It doesn't mean that. But you may or may not enjoy that, doesn't matter. Because the source of joy from the inner has been already experienced, and it is a reliable, independent source of joy in which the other sources of joy become small in comparison. Really speaking, the one example that's given is that it has happened this morning that I was up very early because of I usually get up anyway for the Saturday class. I usually get up at about 4:50 or so to get myself all situated and so on. But because of jet lag, I was up even earlier today, about I think 3:30 or so. It was completely dark. And then you turn on some flashlight, some small light, some table lamp or something. But then, when the sun comes, it overwhelms the light of the lamp. And this is what happened. My wife and I were both up, and she said, when the sun came up, I think it's exactly at 7:30, she said, "Can you please turn off this light? Because the sunlight is overwhelming. You don't need the table lamps anymore." Exactly the same thing will happen in the appreciation of the self. That the light of the sun, of the knowledge, is so bright, so overwhelming, that just small things that you are interested in before recede into the background. And I think one of the things that should be appreciated by the students is that really speaking, my understanding of the self as the source of joy is only interrupted by it's just like the sun is available, but the windows of my room are closed. That's exactly what happens. And then, so what it means is, through vairagya and through jnanam and through uparama, I start to open the windows, and the natural light of the self becomes apparent. It's an overwhelming source of joy. This is exactly what happens. And that source of joy can be called prashantam sukhamuttamam. You see the difference in here. So prashantam means not ordinary shantam, but something which is natural to me. I don't have to acquire it. See? All the other sukham I have to acquire it. And if I acquire it, it can be taken away from me. Here, one interesting thing to see, I was reading a commentary by Swami Maheshananji, and he was saying, he was explaining the word praptihi. Praptihi means, again, the same thing as prashantam. Prashantam and praptihi both start with the letter pra, which is a short for prakarshena. Prakarshena means totally, absolutely. So aptihi means to acquire something, and praptihi means totally acquire something. Same thing as shantam and prashantam. Beautiful explanation by Swami Maheshananji. He says, here's what happens. Any kind of an apti, any kind of an acquisition should be seen as a loan that has to be returned sooner or later. Any kind of an apti. Any kind of an apti means any kind of a sukham. Same thing. Sukham or shantam or aptihi. All three of them without the pra. Without the pra is the nature of something which is given to you. Anything which is given to you eventually will be taken away from you. And Swami Dayanand used to say that this is a very important thing to see, that any acquisition, any apti, any kind of a gain has an equivalent amount of loss. He used to say this, I remember this so well, which is really true I can understand this. Anything that gives you joy will eventually make you cry. And it's interesting that, I remember late in my life when we had grandchildren, it was a great source of joy. Really, just to see them and how lovely they were and how dependent they were and so on and so forth. It was really a great source of joy. But I never forgot that is very temporary and already has happened. They are, when you go to them, they used to just run out of the door and say, "Wow, grandma, grandpa, quick hugs," and so. No more. No. Their parents have to remind them, "Hey, your grandpa and grandma are here, give them a hug." They'll say, "Oh, hi." Gone. Similarly, really speaking, any kind of relationships, even with mother, father, wife, husband, eventually will go one day. Any joy that you have, any joy, this is nature of any acquisition, any joy that you have, eventually it will give you pain. You might as well be ready for it. So this is a loan. In other words, Swami Maheshananji says that really speaking, any joy that you have, other than your own, anything that is invoked is a loan given to you that has to be returned one day. Except for what you already are. It's not something that you acquire from outside. Praptasya prapti. It is your own self that doesn't have to be returned. The tragedy is you don't appreciate it. the one thing that is not alone, which is your own, is called prapti, prakarshena apti. It can also be called sukhamuttamam. It can also be called prashantam. And that is your own self. That doesn't have to be returned. But the tragedy is I don't appreciate it. I'm only appreciative of things that are given to me. And I somehow want to rearrange things so I can keep it for a longer time. No. The longer time, yes, you can prolong it for a while. Eventually it will be gone. So, the real appreciation of the self, which is not alone, which is your own self, the very swarupa, ananda swarupa of the self has to be appreciated. And this is also means, really another way to look at that is the quest for understanding Ishvara, for understanding godliness in your own self. And if you cannot do that, and it is a very funny thing that how can I not know this? This is the way the ignorance is. That's the very nature of the ignorance. That ignorance doesn't mean something new. It just means you don't understand. Just like, you don't understand. It's not as though you don't have furniture in your room, well arranged and everything. But in darkness you stumble over it. All that happens is the light doesn't produce anything. It simply produces your understanding of where things are. That's it. So similarly here also, the understanding that I am already complete. There's nothing produced in it. It just shines through. And if that happens, which is not easy in that manner because you have to deserve it. You have to rearrange your own priorities. It's just like, if you're a child and you're saying, hey, come on, grow up. Forget about playing with balloons and so on. Not easy. It takes its time. But sooner or later it drops off. And you become more enamored with more important things. And so if that should happen, then beautiful things happen, and that's what this result is. Prashanta manasam hi enam yoginam sukham uttamam upayati shanta rajasam brahma bhutam akalmasham. Means whose impurities have been resolved, who's free from all defects. What are the impurities? The impurity is the wrong understanding that my source of joy is outside of me. That is the impurity. Not understanding that it's just like, when you're opening the window, and you feel the light is due to the opening of the window. Not due to the opening of the window. It was already there. You have reversed the closing of the window. That's all you've done. So that's a defect. Anyway, it says, free from all. And I would say probably the best way to explain the defect is your and my understanding that the joy is acquired from outside as opposed to being my own. That is the defect. So free from that defect, who has become Brahman alone. So that is the result given in And you can even extend that to number 28. Yunjan eva sadatmanam yogi vigata kalmasham sukhena brahma samsparsham atyantam sukham asnute. So it is the promise that if you follow this, really speaking, then the yogi, so yogi here means jnani, and not hatha yogi, but a jnani, because that word is used interchangeably and so on, is sukhena brahma samsparsham. So Brahma samsparsha means the touching with the Brahman. Doesn't mean a physical touching, but an understanding that Brahman and myself are non-different. It's just like saying that the room is lighted. Now, because the room was already lighted, I had closed off of it. So that is the Brahma sparsham. Sukhena Brahma samsparsham atyantam sukham ashnate. Limitless joy with absolutely nothing to imagine. The very swarupa of the joy is myself. There is nothing to interrupt it. It's not dependent on anything else. But anyway, all this, these are the verses that now are talking about the result of the meditation. What happens. So that's what it is. So we'll continue on that. I'll leave some time for some questions. But that's what this chapter is now coming to in terms of the meditation. Om asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Yes.
I'm doing things in life because I'm interested in some result.
Correct.
The more I understand this, the less interest I have. Isn't there a conflict there?
No, it's not a conflict in the sense that the question is, what is the what do you hope to achieve by doing? That's the question. What you hope to achieve by doing, you will achieve by not doing. Right? So there's no loss as such. It's not as though you are missing something. One can say, well, there is something missing where I am not being helpful to someone else. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not missing anything. But as far as others are concerned, then I'm missing something. So the answer to that is that if that is the case, if you have been doing something to help others, that will not change. The only thing that will change is that you are trying to do something for yourself. That's already been taken care of. If that is the case, and you feel that others have been depending on you for doing things, then you will become equally proficient in that. The example that I gave in the earlier class, let me repeat it. I know there were a couple of people that will, this is a repeat. Beautiful example given by Swami Maheshananji. What he said was that supposing there is a patient who is very ill in a hospital, and there are two people who are taking care of that patient. One is someone who is related to that patient, the other one is a nurse. Okay? So, if you examine before, let's suppose the patient dies. So if you examine the state of the situation before the death and after death, here's the situation. Before death, you are not as helpful to the patient generally as the nurse is, because he or he, mostly she, is much more proficient in helping somebody. After death, there is a certain dukkha that comes if you are related, and in the case of the nurse, no dukkha whatsoever. In fact, he gave this very beautiful example. Right after the patient dies and the body is taken away and so on and so forth, and as far as the relationship is concerned, you are in deep sorrow and you're crying, your heart out and all kinds of things, and you're missing, you are become broken. As far as the nurse is concerned, she will call her supervisor and say, by the way, the patient in room number 17 has died. Do you have another job for me? That's it. It doesn't mean that she did not take care of the patient. She took great care of the patient, but it's gone. And if the supervisor says, by the way, yes, we need you for certain, go to room number 7 now, she will go to room number 7. So what it means is that if you feel that this is done, I don't need it, but if someone says that we need you, you're not going to... why? Because sometimes if somebody needed you, you might have a reason to refuse it earlier because you had some other priorities. Now you are done. So whatever happens, you just take care of it. So similarly, in the case of Mahatmas, their job is done for themselves, but they still teach. They still are very active in doing so. So not a problem. It's not a conflict in that sense. Yeah.
Today you explained Praptihi and Prashanti.
Correct.
And you normally talk about Praptasya Praptihi.
Mm-hmm.
So in this context, can you explain Praptasya Praptihi?
So Praptasya Prapti just means that there's a slight difference in that. So what is said is the Prapti is one of two kinds. So one is the acquisition of something that you don't already have. And that is called Apraptasya Prapti. Apraptasya Prapti means that, so for example, the typical example is that you are hungry and you need to get some food. So that is called Apraptasya Prapti. You don't have the food, you go get it, and now you're happy. Praptasya Prapti means you already have it, but you don't realize it. And the typical example given is that your keys are not misplaced, they are in your back pocket. You are just not aware of it, that's all. So similarly, the Vedantic Prapti is Praptasya Prapti. And generally our thinking is it is Apraptasya Prapti, that I don't have it, and so I have to acquire it, when in fact you already have it and you don't understand it. So this is where they say that in Apraptasya Prapti, karma is the most important. Jnanam is secondary. In Praptasya Prapti, Jnanam is the most important and karma is secondary. So that's how that definition is. Yeah.
So you said that in meditation when you're doing Jnanam, you focus on understanding yourself, that you are the source of joy.
Correct.
Right? So not understanding yourself in the sense, not understanding what your nature of you is, what your Svabhava is. You're trying to understand that Brahman, right? But when you don't know what it looks like, how do you...
That's why they say Nididhyasanam is not a source of... You should have understood all that much before. Nididhyasanam is not pramanam. Shravanam is pramanam. You have to study in a class for a long period of time. So all that it is, the ragas have to be understood ahead of time. But to enjoy the raga, you just want to be quiet. So nididhyasanam is not an independent source of knowledge.
So it's just a reflection of the Shruti.
Correct. So nididhyasanam cannot be done until you understand the self very well. Very well. So it comes at the very end of it. It's just giving you the very sequence of things. But doesn't mean that by just... Now, what it can be done is that some knowledge can be imparted in meditation itself deliberately. So that is not nididhyasanam. That is shravanam in the guise of meditation. And in fact, it is say that a class in which you are enjoying, you are focused on it, is the right way to do shravanam. That is kind of like, meditation. You become meditative. My God, this is something so beautiful. Your mind is absorbed. Even now, you're not thinking of Oscar or anything like that. You're just absorbed in what the teaching is. So in that sense, the two can be the same, shravanam and nididhyasanam. But generally speaking, the way the nididhyasanam is defined is that you understand the subject matter, you clear all the doubts against it through mananam, and you are very now clear about it, but still it has not given you the phalam. And that phalam is provided by the enjoyment of the meditation. So they say, this is an important thing, that if you are not enjoying the fruits of the vidya, it is due to one of two reasons. One is what is called antakarana shuddhi, the purity of your thinking. The other one is called ekagrata. Ekagrata means just to focus. Just to focus. Beautiful example about ekagrata is that a sun shining on a piece of paper cannot burn it. But a sun which is concentrated on the paper can burn it. So similarly, a general knowledge about the self may not clear all your doubts, but by a focused mind which is well trained to understand the vidya can completely eliminate your doubts. So these are the two reasons why the results are not there. One is antakarana shuddhi. Antakarana shuddhi means you still are spiritually a child. You're still playing with balloons. You're just too absorbed with the outside things and you don't appreciate the beauty of the self. Due to another example given is that antakarana shuddhi means that you're looking at the reflection of yourself through the world and it's a distorted reflection. You need to calm down the mirror, clean the mirror and make sure it's not shaking, and then the self becomes reflected very well. So this is what is called antakarana shuddhi. And ekagrata is something similar to that, where you just you're focused on. And then ekagrata also means, in the case of watching a movie, that you remove all other distractions and you are just following the plot of the movie. Something like that.
So at this stage, we are doing shravanam, and when we're meditating, we're doing more mananam, reflecting on that shravanam.
Yes,
right?
I would say so. And I would say, let me just be frank with you, shravanam has not been completed. So lot of data has to go through. It takes a lifetime. And just attending a few classes here and there just gives you a short introduction to Shravanam. Really, Shravanam means you're spending more time studying than doing anything else in your life. So even our Shravanam is not complete. Not complete. It means years of study. And you're independent, then you become really focused on it. Then you look at it from different angles. And the more you look at it and say, yes, absolutely. Through examples and so on and so forth. And really everything else just recedes in the background. Even for Shravanam, forget about Mananam or all those comes later on. And Shravanam and Mananam becomes interchangeable. Because as you study, you also raise questions about it and resolve the doubts, either by asking someone else or through your own mind. And so your Shravanam becomes clearer and clearer. And so that is the main thing that occurs, Shravanam and Mananam. Nididhyasanam means that you are so well acquainted with, as I mentioned before, I think the key thing is the point in your life where you begin to see that I am an independent source of joy. That takes a certain stage of it. Until then, you have a sort of like a shraddha towards someone, but you yourself have not yet discovered it. Once you do, then the whole thing changes. Then your focus in life, your priorities, your involvement, your attitude goes through a metamorphosis completely. So, yeah. All right. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.